higher, trying to strike a chord, and it's probably A minor.
Welcome back, man.
Oh, yes.
It's been a busy week, hasn't it?
It feels like every week is busy. Every day is busy now.
I know. This part-time job, you know?
Yeah. That we're compensated so well for.
Well, we'll talk about that again. We'll just touch on that a little bit. But yeah, welcome back. Episode 61. We're going with, this is going to be the Nate Newton episode.
Nate Newton, Dallas Cowboys.
Big old Nate Newton, famous for those gaping holes that Emmitt Smith could run through all through the 90s.
Imagine if Barry Sanders had that line.
I know, man. 3-time Super Bowl winner, Nate Newton. Man, I think he was out of like Florida A&M when we were doing a little bit of background research on him. But Florida A&M went and played for like the Tampa Bay Bandits, and then went and played for the Cowboys.
And became a Hall of Famer.
So not the traditional path to the NFL. So anyway, we're remembering Nate Newton as we drink. Again, thank you for Comer Distributing for sponsoring this episode. And the cold beverage today is by Snafu Brewing. It's a Sikkim Sour. And we thought
what an appropriate name.
Yeah. We thought this was a fitting beer. It's a sour because a lot of the stuff that we'll be covering today is going to be some sour news. Everyone knows at this
It's very
point
sick.
About the South Carolina Freedom Caucus founder RJ May was arrested a few days ago. I actually was traveling the state and went into Columbia just on the suspicion that the bond hearing was going to be when I was in Columbia, and went in. I was late, but I did get to sit and hear all that. So we're going to cover all of that in this episode. So folks, we're going to be covering some disturbing details of what the South Carolina Freedom Caucus founder RJ May is being charged with. And in my opinion, my non-legal opinion, it's a strong case. Everything that I've heard live in court the other day, and then what we both read, and everyone can read, it's pretty appalling. It's sick. It's gross, like what you said.
Yeah.
It's just disgusting.
I can't even read through all the descriptions. And if you have any children in your car, if you're listening or watching, I would highly suggest not to have them around as we go through some of this stuff.
So
today.
We will be covering that. We'll also be covering other legal news. Is our friend and York County Senator Wes Clymer brought a lawsuit that is basically stating that the pay raise that was included, the Senate pay raise, by the way, that was included in our state's budget is unconstitutional because that in-district pay increase was effective immediately upon signature of the governor, whereas the Constitution states, and again, that's going to be where the
courts decide.
Yeah, that's right. That's where the question is can a sitting General Assembly give itself a pay increase live, right?
But they can give in-district expenses.
Well, again, that's what will be heard in the state Supreme Court, and so we'll give you an update on that. And then we'll also just give you just an update on anything and everything else we want to talk about, right? Because I know we both had some busy weeks.
I was in New York City.
Yep, you were traveling. You're still working on a documentary.
Yes.
So we can update the audience on that. So, but first things first, let's get into what's been going on here in the state regarding South Carolina Freedom Caucus founder RJ May. So what I'm going to be doing is just going to be introing this case for our two listeners. So if you know all the particulars, you might be able to fast forward 2 minutes. But if you don't, I'm going to be reading just a lot of the black and white details of the case, just so we can bring everybody up to speed. So again, this is a federal case brought by the United States
Attorney.
Yep, United States Attorney here in the District of South Carolina.
Which, to be fair, whenever the case was originally filed, it was U.S. Attorney Adair Ford Barrows, who was appointed by Joe Biden to preside, which, as Thomas Beach said, that was one of his factors of thinking that RJ's being targeted by the deep state. However, the current United States Attorney and Brian Sterling is appointed by Donald Trump.
Yeah. And again, that might raise a little bit of question in my mind. But that's weak tea. That is a weak argument. And we can get into all that sort of the drama around this case. But let's stick to just the facts.
Just the facts.
So, on June 10th, 2025, a federal grand jury indicted the South Carolina Freedom Caucus founder Robert John May III on 10 counts of distribution of child pornography. The charges against the defendant are based upon his use of a social media application called Kik to participate in multiple chat groups dedicated to the trading of child pornography. All right, little footnote here. It's important that we talk about Kik for a minute. Kik is an LA-based American company, which will be crucially important.
Yeah.
Because they also found other apps similar to Kik, but they were international. And those are harder to get cooperation from and all those types of things. So, on May 27th, back in 2024, Kik sent a cyber tip line report to the National Center for Missing and Exploiting Children.
So no one reported it. The app itself reported
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
To NCMEC.
Yep, and we've talked about NCMEC before. So we'll call the National Center for Missing and Exploiting Children NCMEC just in this conversation.
And just for the people that don't know, NCMEC was founded by John Walsh, who used to do America's Most Wanted.
Yep. So Kik has a self-reporting mechanism in the software. So on May 27th of last year, so in 2024, Kik sent a cyber tip line report to NCMEC regarding the child pornography. We'll call it CSAM after this, which is child sexual abuse material. So was being transmitted via this social media platform by Kik user, and this is just rich, Joe Biden spelled with 4 N's, so Joe Biden, NNNNN69 on March 31st, 2024. All right, so the activity, so this is the timeline. The activity of Joe Biden 69, that's the username, was on March 31st. It began on March 31st.
The first one from Kik.
Correct. So the activity was going on the Kik app by, allegedly, the South Carolina Freedom Caucus founder RJ May on March 31st.
While we were in session still.
Hey, but this is one of the questions I brought up was almost 2 months later, Kik sent the cyber tip.
Right.
Like, that's how long it takes for the software and all of sort of the inner workings of that.
Because they don't want to violate someone's constitutional
right. They got to go through the videos. They've got to go through the files. They've got to look at the group chat. They've got to do a lot of internal stuff.
We've got to get better at that.
But there's a threshold. Is even a private company it does take some time for them to actually even register to the level where they're sending this cyber tip to NCMEC.
Yep.
All right, so it gets to NCMEC in May 27 of 2024. NCMEC flags 50 files. Of those, 28 different videos containing child sexual abuse material were found.
But all 50 files were flagged as CSAM.
Yeah, but they were duplicates, right? So they boiled it down to 28 different videos that started this tip. So the cyber tip line report provided an AT&T IP address as being used to download and share the CSAM. NCMEC geolocated the IP address to West Columbia, South Carolina in Lexington County. The South Carolina Attorney General's office assigned the cyber tip line report to the Lexington County Sheriff's Department in Lexington, South Carolina. So all of that's going on in late May of 2024. A month later, on June 27th, 2024, the Lexington County Sheriff obtained a state search warrant requesting all customer or subscriber information for the AT&T account associated with the IP address. AT&T provided the billing party associated with the IP address as May and the service address as May's residence in West Columbia. So basically, what Lexington County was doing was just verifying, right? They were verifying all of the digital and electronic.
Make sure it's not a VPN.
Yep. Making sure all of the digital and the electronic sort of markers were jiving with geolocation, matching with billing records, all those things. Making sure, like, taking a lot of due diligence to make sure this all rises to a level where, for the next step. Same day, it looks like the Lexington County Sheriff's Office obtained a South Carolina state court search warrant requesting the contents of the Kik account related to the username Joe Biden NNN69. About 2 weeks later, on July 12th, 2024, Kik complied and provided the subscriber information for this account. The Kik user Joe Biden with 4N69 registered the account on March 30th, 2024 at 1:42 using a Samsung device and provided an unconfirmed email address. The contents of the account also contained 265 videos, 265 folks, displaying CSAM from March 30th of 2024 until April 4th. So 5 days.
The day before Easter
Yeah.
as well.
Yep. So
In
March.
2023.
So in 5 days, from March 30th to April 4th, 2024, username Joe Biden 69 sent or received approximately 1,147 messages with other Kik users. The messages discussed trading child sexual abuse material with other users. Now, if you're like me, for the two listeners out there, in 5 days, over 1,100 messages regarding child sexual abuse material, that is alarming. So if there was one thing sitting in that bond hearing the other day, to me, there is a culture and environment out there. This is much more pervasive than I've ever thought. And I know you've gone,
Yeah.
you have got an education.
I've seen horrible.
Yeah, because
Stuff.
of all the stuff that
Yeah.
you're doing, right? So for me, I was just, again, man, it's just shocking to me.
Yeah, anybody could do that.
Correct. But in 5 days, you're getting 265 videos and having over 1,100 messages with other like-minded Kik users discussing pedophilia, CSAM, whatever you want to call it. So Kik provided the IP address that each user connected from for every message that was sent, not just a particular session. HSI, that's the
Homeland Security.
Yep. Analyzed those IP addresses and found that the vast majority connected back to May, either at his residence or on his Verizon cell phone account. So basically all this was doing, law enforcement was dotting I's, crossing T's, and I'm going to talk about that on a separate
Okay, but
on note.
the biggest thing is it shows that one screen name. Now, granted, there ends up being another one.
Yeah.
Utilized Kik 48 times. The VPN, and then the Verizon account associated with May's cell phone 67 times. And then within the family residence, 958 times.
Yeah. So, I mean, just the sheer volume. I don't understand how he would have time to do anything else.
Well, it makes
You know
me
what I
think,
mean?
like, where's your family at this time? Was the family going for Easter and you were there by yourself?
I
Like,
don't know.
what's the
And-
issue?
And again, we can talk about that stuff too, because that got brought up in the bond hearing. That's been brought up on social media now a lot. You heard from both sides, whether it was the U.S. attorney or May's attorney, about, how do we know it was him using it and all those types of things. And I don't know if we'll get that far in the weeds, but it's pretty.
Some of the messages kind of show you all that.
Yeah, it's a very strong case. Let's put it that way. So, leading up to all of those things, so March 30th through April 4th, and again, these are allegations, right? But there are strong evidenced allegations that South Carolina Freedom Caucus founder RJ May was on the Kick app from March 30th to April 4th, 2024, viewing, distributing, transmitting child sexual abuse material. Law enforcement then gets the tip late May, starts working from late May into June into that summer of 2024. And then all of this culminates on August the 5th, 2024. It was, looks like a collaborative operation between HSI, which is Homeland Security, and South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED, executed a federal search warrant at the May residence. During the search warrant, May did identify that one of his phones, because I think he had 4 or 5 cell phones that they seized for search. I do believe that they extended him, just legal rights to get his attorney's number off of his personal cell phone. They did also look at other devices,
such as his wife's phone.
Yeah, his wife's phone. She actually complied immediately, and they found nothing, and so I think that was returned to her. The initial forensic analysis of the contents of May's phone yielded several items of evidentiary value. His user dictionary in the device revealed it contained the terms, the username that Joe Biden with 4N69 and the same email address that was used to register it in the Kick account. For the, criminal activities that were going on through that device on the Kick app from March 30th.
Also contained the Telegram application.
Yeah, so
the Mega application.
Yeah, so they started talking about this a lot, and that's why I've highlighted it here, is there was several other applications, Telegram being one, Mega being another, on his phone. Now, and also low-key messenger, which, again, I've never even heard of these things. Why would you, right?
Telegram I've heard of, but that's what the Freedom Caucus members were communicating on.
But all of these things were deleted on April 4th within seconds of each other, which I found interesting. Now, again, let's just go through the news of this, and then we'll give you some commentary. Importantly, in his Kick chats, May discussed the use of Telegram and Mega with his fellow like-minded pedophiles, both of which are applications that have frequently been used by individuals engaged in CSAM activity due to their encryption and foreign ownership. So that is the case that South Carolina Freedom Caucus founder RJ May is up against. Disgusting, vile. All of these charges make literally your stomach turn sour. Being in that bond hearing the other day, again, because I wanted to hear it for myself, because I know what's going to happen, right? It seems like anytime you get, especially, the Freedom Caucus founder, RJ May, he is a divisive character. He's been around for a while. He's
been quiet all year this year.
Yeah, but I mean, everyone I've talked to prior even to this, you either like the guy or you hate the guy.
He spread a bunch of lies whenever he ran Elizabeth N's campaign against me.
And he did have a reputation in running campaigns of being tough. There was no line that he wouldn't step over for his candidate.
And in my opinion, and I've said it many times, I don't necessarily have a problem with other Freedom Caucus networks, but I have a major problem with the South Carolina Freedom Caucus, because I believe that culture was established by Adam Morgan and RJ May and what they did.
Yeah.
And the new group has just kind of taken over and continued that culture. But a lot of that was RJ's campaigning.
Yeah.
And the way that they went about things.
So, and just back to the criminal case, importantly, the South Carolina Freedom Caucus founder, RJ May, distributed approximately 220 different child pornography videos about 479 times. I'm not going to go into the the judge offered 10 specific videos.
I think we should post the PDF on our Pipes and Politics website so people can click and view it.
Yep. And look, they, in the motion to detain RJ, so the judge spelled out, gave reasons why she felt that RJ was a threat not only to his own kids, but the community at large. And that's why he is not free right now to post a bond and get out. So he is currently sitting in, I believe, the Barnwell facility right now. But in her motion to detain, the judge gave 10 different examples, and they describe at length what's going on in these videos, these 10 videos, out of the 220 different child porn videos.
Yeah. So these are just 10 of the 228.
Correct. And I'm not going to read them because it's disturbing and it's gross. And I prefer to live in a world that...
But we are talking about toddlers.
Yeah, folks, this
is not like teenage, like someone that's attracted to a 15 or 16-year-old girl. I'm not saying that that's okay by any means. But you hear people often make those distinctions.
So I'll perfectly frank and transparent. When I first heard that the South Carolina Freedom Caucus founder RJ May's house was being searched, and subsequently in the weeks that followed, all these devices that got seized, and I think it was Will Folks with Fitz News talked about HSI is typically involved with child sexual abuse cases. I even thought to myself, well, this isn't something that what this has turned out to be, right? It's just him surfing on and again, not good behavior by any means, but he's surfing a porn site and he clicked on something that happened to be, right? Like happenstance. And that's not the case.
No, this is downloading the videos onto your
hard folks
drives.
And
hiding the hard drive. What was it, 40 plus hard drives?
Yeah, well, and just like what you said, this isn't something that is, when we were growing up, do you remember that Girls Gone Wild series where it was basically a guy who followed around spring breakers around Panama City, Myrtle Beach.
Which are like 18, 19 years of age.
Yeah,
which are of age, but still.
Yeah. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about infants, toddlers, prepubescent, and pubescent boys and girls. Okay? You can read for yourself.
Some of the search terms, I'll give you one example that I thought was horrible.
It is.
And I'd never heard the term, but it was bad daddy.
Yeah, bad dads.
Bad dads.
I never heard that either.
Which are men who rape their toddlers and film it.
And again, I won't go into that because it actually got worse than that. And again, we try to be a PG-13 podcast here. For the most part. But so yeah, again, this is more than troubling news now. We sort of made
the joke of troubling news.
A friendly joke because I was trying to be...
You notice I'm a lot quieter today.
And again, we can get into some of the stuff, but that is the facts of the case that the United States is bringing against the South Carolina Freedom Caucus founder RJ May. We will go into some of the details of those. So just me personally sitting in that bond hearing the other day, it was very, very disturbing to me.
I would have been there if I wasn't.
No, you were
filming and out of town.
But it was alarming to hear all the evidence. It was sickening to hear this wasn't a happenstance. This wasn't him sort of tripping over an adult porn site and hitting high school. You know what I mean? It was, again, we're talking about kids, man. And it just disturbed me to no end. Because we're all parents. Most folks who are probably listening have kids themselves, and you always personalize those things. And you can't imagine a monster like that not only walking our streets, but walking in the General Assembly.
I will certainly say, anyone from the last few years of me being working with a lot of the law enforcement that investigates this, and listening to these investigators and seeing how they leave their profession due to the grotesque images and videos and stuff that they are watching. Just please pray for RJ's kids. I am.
Yeah.
I sincerely, and pray for all the kids. But I really.
Well, and so let's talk about.
I really worry about that.
Nope. So me and Representative Gatch were talking about this yesterday. I'll tell you, folks, my personal experience sitting in that bond hearing, there was a very, I would say, where it just pulls on your personal capacity for compassion for innocent folks. And in this case, I'm talking about his wife, Beth, and you mentioned his kids. There was evidence brought to bear that there was some compromising and nude photos of his kids on these devices. And it led law enforcement during their investigation to question the child. And again, there's proper protocols for all that. They have a forensic child interviewer come in. You know, I'm assuming they have a child psychology background. And they asked, they interviewed the child. And I don't know how old his son is. He's got to be above 5, but below 10 probably. Yeah. And it was very troubling to hear.
Callahan's age.
Yeah. It was troubling to hear the documentation of this interview, because when they tried to talk to the son, and you know, with children, you talk about just things like, hey, you had a birthday party. Oh, I see you had, here's a picture of your birthday party. And, you know, they tried to like sort of ease into things. And it was noted by the
examiner,
the HSI investigator who led this investigation, that during that interview of RJ May's son, he basically said, when pictures of his birthday party got brought up, he said, I can't talk about pictures. I was told I can't talk about pictures. You know, again, the interview continued, and the young boy was troubled enough to start slapping his face and like saying he can't talk about pictures. And it got so far to where he found tape and put it over his mouth. And that's when, rightfully so, the interview was ended and child mental health was brought up as a reason, right? And
that's the reason I asked before. Whenever RJ's house, whenever they came through the search, were there dogs there as well? Because the electronic sniffing dogs, typically with these horrific crimes, the most horrendous, and it's hard to believe that you can get more horrendous than what's in there, but the most horrendous files are hidden in micro SD cards, often through a notch behind a baseboard or a trim in the house, and investigators don't find them. So it's important to bring in those electronic sniffing dogs, because they sniff out those microchips.
Oh, okay.
And help you find that additional information.
And again, law enforcement did admit that they did not find any evidence to substantiate a charge that he was abusing his own child or children. One of the more, I would say, what really pulled on me was when at the conclusion of the hearing, you know, the government makes their case. I think it was Attorney Phillips was making the case for May in his defense. And the judge asked before she makes her ruling, is there any evidence or is there any witness testimony that the defense would like to bring before she makes her ruling? And May's attorney turns to Beth May, who was sitting a little bit to my right and behind me, signals her up to the little partition there. She comes up, they talk. I think it was her father. I'm assuming it was she also, Beth brought her dad with her. He came up and joined the conversation. It was dead silent in this courtroom. They were whispering back and forth with the attorney. Obviously, she was emotional. She was crying, and basically she just shook her head in the negative and sat back down. I can only assume he was asking if she wanted to take the stand. Yeah, so anyway, there's a lot of innocent victims in this crime, in this alleged crime, in this case, that, yeah, definitely praying for, because his kids and his wife are going to have to just deal with all of this, and it's sad. It's really sad.
Yeah, and prayers.
And so
sincerely,
that's the case against South Carolina Freedom Caucus founder RJ May. Now let's talk about some of the
spin
reactions, you would say. A lot of people
lack thereof reaction.
So let's go back to and again, I can already let me tell you where the defense is going, because it got alluded to yesterday, and this is, and again, I was asked yesterday by media when I was walking out of the Matthew Perry federal courthouse. They said, hey, you heard him trying to suggest the defense and blame it on political rivals or enemies, and that they had, someone hack in and plant all this material. And like I said the other day, I said, look, Attorney Phillips has a job and a duty, and in this country, you have the right to legal representation and a defense. Now, I think it's a BS defense. I don't think it's going to carry any weight or hold water. But, and let me go back to
considering multiple.
Yeah, all
devices.
You're right. So, agents, I'm reading from the motion to detain. Agents confirmed during surveillance of RJ's house, and again during the search of the residence, that the Wi-Fi at the May residence was password protected. Thus, the CSAM activity on Kik to have been conducted by someone other than May, that person would have had to know the Wi-Fi password. Similarly, someone would have had to possess May's cell phone to have initiated the CSAM activity on Kik that utilized the Verizon IP address. That is May's defense. That is what their attorney is going to suggest, a vast rhino conspiracy that
the deep state,
that someone had to get his phone,
or as another member of the Freedom Caucus just last week compared the raid of RJ's house to the raid of Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, so lawfare. And so that's going to be their defense. Their defense is RJ had political rivals, as they called him in the bond hearing yesterday or the other day, basically planned out this to somehow get into his phone that's password protected, get into the Kik app that's password protected, and also get into
the Wi-Fi,
his home Wi-Fi, which is password protected.
And to have to be at the different locations that he was while he was on his cell phone.
Yep, and also be able to say amen, happy Easter to one of RJ's contacts, which is in his phone. And do all of these things simultaneously, which is pretty far-fetched.
Which wasn't that amen, happy Easter immediately replied to within the minute of downloading child pornography.
He literally was watching child porn and responded to 2 or 3 different text messages, one of them being...
This is all like within a minute time span.
Yeah, 1:10 to 1:14, like a 3-minute where he was watching a couple different videos and text messaging contacts in his phone. Yeah, so again, I don't see this thing really going to trial. I see with the evidence presented, I see him coming to terms with it, but we'll see. And so now
I think he's already changed attorneys, from my understanding, too.
Oh, has
than his initial attorney.
Okay. So let's get into some of the political reactions. We have, as soon as these indictments were unsealed the other day, that was the first domino to where Speaker Merle Smith initiated RJ's suspension,
which is automatically under current law.
Yeah. So when all of this started happening, all of us in the Republican caucus were having internal discussions about, hey, kick him out.
Yeah.
Like suspend him from the House, do whatever temporarily until the investigation's done.
And you can't do that because then you could have lawmakers making a charge against someone just to get them out of office and pulling away the people's voice that elected him.
Yeah, so when it comes to people voting for their rep and where there's public trust involved, right, there's a higher standard.
Yes.
You can't just because we think something or someone alleges something that even would bring a search of your house.
Now, let's...
You can't just do what you want to do, right?
Right.
Now, there is something different that the South Carolina Freedom Caucus founder, RJ May, was elected by his district to represent them in the House. So there is a public trust. There is a representation that goes with that. Now, what they did not do is elect him to be in the Freedom Caucus, right?
Right. Caucus rules are completely different than House rules.
Right. So there's a higher standard for the actions taken by Merle Smith, the Speaker of the House, to suspend him.
And he hasn't been a member of the House caucus since I've been elected. So at least 3 years.
Yep. So,
matter of fact, the entire loyalty oath lie that was established was due to Freedom Caucus members leaving to protect RJ. Because the rule that they were leaving was over RJ running campaigns for a living within the Republican caucus.
yeah, right. You cannot.
So the people who left just to be part of the Freedom Caucus did so solely to protect RJ.
Well, and they even told us that. Some of them said, like, look, I don't even really care. But for solidarity for the South Carolina Freedom Caucus, we've got to stay with our buds. And again, I get it. But when you have a member, and again, I know he's the founder of that caucus, and so there's maybe some personal ties. But when his house got searched, and it was identified that it was a joint effort between SLED and HSI, and what HSI typical cases are related to, child sexual abuse material, they should have done the right thing, in my opinion, and I'm sure in yours. They should have suspended him right away. That was August 6th or 7th, whenever that search occurred. He should have been suspended. And I think, looking back, they would probably admit it. Maybe not. I don't know.
Well, according to their lies that they're spreading, they did suspend him in August.
Yeah.
But
you and I
we
know
have
that.
proof to show that is not the case.
So again, that happens in August. Now let's look at, and again, these are judgment calls, but this was an easy one for me. I communicated these. I went back and looked at my communication on my cell phone. I talked to Jordan in December of that year and said, like, guys, you need to do the right thing, because Jordan got elected at the same time we were. So he was in our freshman class. So
he was different last session than he is this session.
So I kind of, and Jordan's a smart guy, and I said, Jordan, you got to do the right thing, man. I know he's a founding member and all these things, but if you really want, because folks, to give you a little bit of context, Adam Morgan and RJ were the big dogs in the Freedom Caucus.
The chair and vice chair.
They were founders. They were chair, vice chair, the whole bit.
They were freaking frat.
Yep, and RJ
They were Sessions and Guffey.
Yeah.
Whatever we were there.
And so, and RJ was the campaign side. So all the money ran through his Ivory Tusk Consulting. They would go out and recruit candidates. Those candidates would then pay Ivory Tusk, and then Ivory Tusk would run candidates against whoever.
They established the South Carolina Freedom Caucus.
Yeah, around the state. And that is where the conflict of interest lies. You and I have always said this, that, look, RJ can run campaigns, but he can't run house campaigns because that's a conflict of interest, right? He is literally picking and choosing and recruiting candidates to run against people that sit in the chamber.
And throwing up amendments to waste time just so he can make a campaign mailer.
And guess what? He makes money off the campaign mailer. And that's thus the conflict of interest. And again, we got drugged for that by Fitz News and
yes,
and some of the Freedom Caucus.
And this was even before I found out, prior to the loyalty oath, which happened in December of 22, that in November of 22, RJ was recruiting groups and having them sign these non-disclosure agreements so that they could get funding and help with their organizations just to be echo chambers for the South Carolina Freedom Caucus.
Kind of like the American Action Fund.
Very much like.
or Palmetto gun rights.
American Action Fund's working for the federal side of the Freedom Caucus.
Man, I don't care, man.
They're taking the dark DC
There
money.
is
They're
so
not
many-
the South Carolina state can afford American Action
There
Fund.
is so many different groups out there that just spring up out of nowhere. They sound
like
legitimate.
United Patriots Alliance. Everyone wants to quote this SC Freedom Index, which is the John Birch Society, like the United Patriots Alliance, and some other group. They're all AstroTurf organizations for the South Carolina Freedom Caucus.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to quote Club for Growth, well, guess what? RJ May was a consultant for Club for Growth before he went to the House.
Yeah. So again, folks, we do this podcast. You and I, we're literally doing a charity event, and you heard me talking to a guy about it. And you're like, "Hey, what? You started a podcast?" Like, and I was like, "Hell yeah!" You're funnier than I am anyway. But literally, we started this because we try to be as transparent can be. Now, there are some things that we can't be transparent on, and that's stuff that basically is like an executive session, right? Or things that we cannot divulge or can't talk about out in public. But we're as transparent as can be. And so again, all of those things with that history of RJ, when his house got searched, the big error in judgment, the big mistake that what I thought Chair Jordan Pace made was he didn't immediately kick him out.
No, they held a press conference.
Right. And again.
And during this press conference.
Yeah. Well, so let me talk about this. Well, yeah, you can talk about the press conference.
Yeah. Because they held this press conference, which was the day that we started our first caucus meeting of this year for the Republican caucus.
December. It was what we call
early December.
An organizational session.
Correct.
So after the November elections, you get every 2 years you get a new body, right? You get a new membership of the House because new members get voted in the prior November. So that first week in December or December 10th or something like that, we have what's called an organizational session, usually a day or two. The Republican caucus all gets together. We talk about some of our agenda items, priorities, this, that, and the other. And a lot of times leadership then goes out and has a press conference about it, right? They make that public. The South Carolina Freedom Caucus did the same thing. And this is something, again...
To talk about their agenda.
Yep.
Right?
But
again, the RJ news was fresh from August.
Yeah. And he gets asked, Jordan Pace gets asked, hey, so how many members do you have? And is RJ a member?
He said 21.
Which
I don't even know where that number's coming from.
Again, maybe they're secret members because they don't publish, they're not transparent about who's a member, which runs counter
to freedom,
to transparency. Yeah. So and again, you can go back and look it up, but he sort of bumbled that answer. He didn't just say.
But you can see the ones that stood in solidarity with him at the press conference.
Yeah. And so RJ at that time, was still a member.
Now, granted, I think you, but the search warrant was already out to show what was confiscated. I even posted the picture of the Freedom Caucus van saying, I don't think this is a good look, and say what you want, but I'm getting free candy.
Right.
Things like that. So I'd already been busting on them to suspend and get rid of RJ.
Yep.
There's no reason that he should be part of the Freedom Caucus if his house is getting investigated for child sex abuse material.
Yeah.
But you had members saying, oh, this is due to weapons charges. You had members saying that that they met and there was no reason because he is innocent until proven guilty. Now, keep in mind during this press conference where you had Jordan DeMay, whenever the reporter asked if RJ was a member of the caucus, his response was, well, I'm curious as to why you would ask. As long as he's a member of the House, he's a member of the caucus.
Right.
And then you had Stephen Frank and April Cromer reply with, he's an upstanding citizen or upstanding member, or one of those.
I think Stephen Frank, who at that time and is a freshman member of the House and a freshman.
Well, he just said he's a member. Right.
He said, well, yeah, if RJ is a member of the House, implying he's a member of the caucus.
But yeah, and then April said he's an upstanding member.
Yep. And again, folks, when you have a member of your club's house get searched, raided, whatever you want to call it, and over 40-something devices get seized by HSI, you don't say that I think RJ will be vindicated. We will welcome him back with open arms. He is a upstanding member of our caucus. You don't say those things.
And all of those things were quoted in the publications right there afterwards.
And again...
And now they claim that he was suspended in August.
Well...
But yet they couldn't say that at the press conference in December.
Again, so this is going to be problematic for them to explain away. Again,
and I've got numerous members replying, stating that they met, the caucus met, took a vote, and decided not to suspend or not to expel him from the caucus.
Yep. And so
that time.
And let's talk about this defense that some of the members of the Freedom Caucus are saying. Again, some of them are coming out right and saying it's despicable. I condemn him, bury him, shoot him, whatever. Great. But some of the defenses of some of the members are, well, we have due process in our country. We have the presumption of innocent until proven guilty. Folks,
in court, that's one thing.
You do have that constitutional God-given right in, as you said, the court of law, but you don't have it for a private club. And that is the distinction, right? And I don't think we were suggesting that you should strip RJ of his constitutional rights.
I was suggesting to castrate him in August.
That's true. But what we were suggesting was do the right thing and suspend him or distance yourself, or you're going to be tainted by your proximity to what is now an alleged...
Well, I mean, we had the phone call with Thomas Beach.
Child sex predator. I personally called several members who...
To say, hey, don't come out defending and buying this BS that this is some weapons charge.
Folks, and again, a lot of times on social media is the only thing that you see interactions between, say, a Freedom Caucus member and Brandon Guthrie, or a Freedom Caucus member and Heath Sessions. There's a lot of connective tissue with just relationships, right? You have to work with everybody in the house to get things done. And I personally like Thomas Beach. I think y'all...
My desk mate now.
Y'all have mended some fences. That's great. And again, I'm not saying we all always disagree, but you form a personal relationship with these members, whether you get along on social media or not. And so I personally called Thomas Beach.
And some people are pricks and they'll just smile at you and say, yeah, that was just politics. That's the only reason I'm saying that.
Yeah, so...
I'm just not that person.
And again, I personally called Beach and I think a few others, and I personally told them, I said, look, knowing the things that have come out in the last month, stay away from this. Do not publicly endorse or defend.
Wait until you hear all the information.
The Freedom Caucus founder RJ May. Do not do that, because it's sick, it's vile, and if it comes to be true, you're going to get shot. You're going to get the buckshot from that CSAM criminal activity. You just will.
Because anyone with common sense knows that if you have electronic devices being repossessed from your home, that has nothing to do with weapons charges.
Right. And that's what, for folks, for the two listeners out there, that's what the initial response or defense that RJ gave some of his caucus members was that, oh, it's just lawfare because I have weapons, which...
Again, and I really don't even think that he said that. I think he was on a conference call with them and said, this is the government weaponizing themselves, and there's just some people that are just so dumb they twisted it into weapons charges.
Right.
My personal opinion.
Yeah.
But no proof of that. But you know what's even greater? So this whole time, since August until now, the argument has been, there's been no proof. I'm blocked by April Cromer, the vice chair of the Freedom Caucus, on social media now. How free is that? But anyway, I've had these arguments, and she said, what, do you know something I don't? Well, I know what is in the paper. The search warrant's in the paper. All of this stuff is in here. And yet you want to defend him over and over and over again. Matter of fact, she went so far to challenge a private citizen to a debate and said that he was more despicable than the predator. I wonder if she's going to recant that statement, considering now she sees these. But the worst part about this,
We'll see.
Nothing changed. No more information is given out. The indictment was not released until yesterday.
Or whenever it was unsealed Thursday morning, and Wednesday
night, the Freedom
evening,
Caucus.
right after he was arrested around 5:30.
Only thing that changed was he was put in handcuffs.
Yep. No,
Nothing else.
No
information.
No evidence. No, the charges were not unsealed. The indictments weren't unsealed. No one knew anything. It was all speculation. But Wednesday evening,
now we got to issue a statement talking about how despicable this is and what a horrible person he is.
And
that he's indefinitely removed. And so everything you said was hypocritical.
Right. And well, at least inconsistent, right?
Hypocritical asshole is a better way of putting it.
Minimally, it's inconsistent.
Yeah.
On the other end, it's hypocritical. And again, so, and that's the funny thing. Now, and this is what frustrates me, is the politics of it, right? And Jordan's very good at this. He's a pro.
Pinocchio Pace is good at that?
He is no. He's a pro.
He's doing a really shitty job this year.
Well, he's a pro at trying to get like, okay, I got to hit this button and this button to make it look okay. Look, now they're calling. I found
now
it
they're
so,
trying to say that we're attacking.
I found it so laughable that they come out and say, I am calling for
his resignation,
the speaker to suspend him and da-da-da-da. And I'm like, okay, sit down. Like, you have no credibility to call or be of any moral leadership here, because for almost a year, you have failed at least the 15 to 20 members just in your own caucus. So hush, sit down, let the adults talk now. And when the formal charges, the formal indictment was unsealed, the speaker did his duty and suspended South Carolina Freedom Caucus founder RJ May.
And then our majority leader issued a statement that they are, in order to expel a member from the House, which hasn't happened in like 2 centuries, I believe it is.
Yeah, it's been a while.
In order to expel a member from the House, the way that has to go is only the body can do it. And before the body can do it, there has to be an ethics investigation.
Yeah.
So we can't just decide we're going to kick someone out. So we have filed for the ethics investigation. But within the ethics investigation, it also says that we want to make sure that the devices that he's using at the State House are not involved. And that some of the monies were never exchanging throughout any of these devices.
Yep. So basically, we're going to have to build our own case, so to speak, and use all of that evidence. I'm sure we can.
And then we'll have to come into a special session.
Yep.
Just to
hopefully
expel him.
And I talked with some leadership yesterday. Hey, y'all tell us when and where, and I'll show up, because once we get the ethics, the evidence from the ethics committee, that case gets made, and then they can call us back, and then by a 2/3 vote of the House, we can expel him. So, and then his seat will be vacated, and then special election, and which I'm sure that district is already trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Who's next to lead them in the House.
And if you want to keep up with the information, continue to follow us. However, Pints and Politics, because I'm a little bit more in your face with this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not posting everything on Pints and Politics because I don't want that to reflect badly on Heath, but I will have my own voice. Trying to make sure.
Damn.
Can't throw us both into the same.
Hey, I do get text messages about your behavior. I will say. It's highly questionable.
I think my biggest push next year is going to go ahead and get my castration bill moving, and I'm going to make a push to name it the RJ May bill.
We did talk about this. The Youth in Government program, which is a high school program.
Yeah.
That was the bill
that they come out with.
That they passed through both chambers of their student government, and the governor signed.
Yeah.
But no. Sorry. It wasn't
moved here.
It was student legislature, South Carolina student legislature, which is the college-age kid version of state government. And I thought that was wild that they passed this just, a year ago, and subsequently we're
just
dealing
sitting
with
on the desk. But hopefully we can get it moved. Hopefully the RJ May bill will get moving quickly.
So that'll wrap this up for this time on the South Carolina Freedom Caucus. Founder RJ May being arrested and charged with and held, detained in prison on child sexual abuse material, distributing and viewing that stuff. And we will be back in the next segment talking about another lawsuit. This episode of Pints of Politics is brought to you by Comer Distributing. Comer Distributing Company is a wholesale beer distributor located in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Founded in 1971, Comer is a family-owned business that distributes beer and other beverages to York, Chester, Fairfield, Lancaster, Kershaw, Lexington, and Richland counties.
Spit pimpin', baby.
Reminds me of the way I was talking at the well with my hands, right?
Yeah, I did find that pretty funny.
That just shows how disgusted you are in something that I couldn't even talk without getting my hands going.
So this is, I guess this is the lawsuit podcast this week.
The lawsuit that's going to cost the taxpayers more money than what the pay raise supposedly would.
Hey, look, if y'all wouldn't be doing unconstitutional
if the Senate,
yeah, that's right. If the Senate hadn't have done this unconstitutional pay raise, no. So we've talked about this, folks. The House passed out a budget that once the Senate got it, they put their own numbers to it, voted in a in-district increase, otherwise known as AKA the pay raise.
in district expenses.
And so
it is not taxable so long as you spend it and provide the receipts.
And on Pints of Politics, we call it the Senate pay raise, to be specific. And speaking of Senator Lieber, he came up to Rock Hill just last week or so, didn't he?
Yes.
Yep. He get a good turnout and all?
Yeah. I don't know about that because I was at an event, so I wasn't able to attend it.
Oh, okay.
I was hosting a wedding. Or officiating a wedding.
So I guess Senator Lieber is making good use of his pay raise, coming up to Rock Hill and
that was just talking.
No, but so anyway, the Senate put in that in-district increase, aka the pay raise. We call it the Senate pay raise. That came back over to the House. We took it out and we passed the House budget. Did not include the Senate pay raise, by the way. So when our folks get to conference, they, go hard in the paint, try to, build consensus to get a budget.
And the Senate's conference committee were people that voted against the pay raise to begin with.
Yeah.
But they were forcing it because the will of the body and their voting showed that that's what they want.
Yep. So whatever the reasons, the Senate pay raise got into the final conference report on the budget. And then we all came back as scheduled on May 28th. And we did not have any opportunity to take the pay raise out. It was either an up or down vote. So the budget passed, and due to the pay raise, the Senate pay raise being included, our very own Senator Clymer basically went and hired a friend of his, former Senator Dick Harpootlian.
I'm going to start calling Wes. Wes, don't play That's right. Clymer. Golly, could he get the word out?
And now is suing. And the basis for this petition is that the South Carolina Constitution prohibits the General Assembly from increasing the compensation of its own members. Any increase must take effect after the next General Assembly is seated in January of 2027, following the next general election. So basically saying that we can't give ourselves a raise, but we can, in effect, vote for a raise effective after the next elections. That way, the people are basically deciding who gets the raise. And
I'm going to be honest. I think that if a lot of people would have heard Wes's speech on the Senate floor, now granted, we're in two different chambers, so we don't get to hear this stuff.
And they went at noon, we went at 1.
Yeah.
So we didn't have any chance.
There wasn't really any time to really get in there to hear it. But I think that if a lot of members would have heard Wes's speech, him talking about how good the budget was, but however, he found that this was unconstitutional, and that if we did pass it, he was going to be looking towards a lawsuit, I think you would have had that vote change even within the House, truthfully.
Potentially.
Because, I know I've talked to many of them that felt the same way I did, like, hey, our hands are tied.
A lot of folks. I think we just had a lot of folks in our caucus that did not want the pay raise included, but we weren't given the opportunity to slice it out.
Right.
And thus, they were like, well, there's a lot of good stuff in the budget, right?
It's one of the most conservative budgets, which even West even said that from the floor.
And look, I said the same thing. But look, if it were up to me, I was telling members, hey, let's vote the budget down. Let's make the conferees go back into the conference and force to get the pay raise out. Now, our conferees did tell us the Senate was pretty intransigent that the pay raise was going. They were going to go, to the mattress fighting for that pay raise, which I said, let them. Let this play out over the summer in the newspapers. But we didn't go that way. So Wes is now sued. I wanted to give everyone an update. This got filed last week. The Supreme Court is considering it on an expedited basis. So the Supreme Court has agreed to take this up pretty soon. So the arguments are due to the court Monday. So here in a few days, all the court documents are due. And then Clymer said that his attorney, Dick Harpootlian, their rebuttal is due Wednesday. So all that means is we should expect an expedited decision if the state, so the House, the Senate, and Curtis Loftus have to prepare, get their documents in for the pay raise on Monday. Senator Clymer and Harpootlian have to give their rebuttal next Wednesday, and I would anticipate an expedited decision within a few weeks. So hopefully by July 1st, before the next new budget year, this will all be solved, figured out.
And was it 34 members have already signed a form stating that they're not accepting
let's talk about
the pay raise?
Yep. So, and again, folks, this is another layer to this, and it kind of pissed me off because it obfuscated the actual merits of the arguments that state legislators should have increased compensation, right? Because, dude, this is a lot of time. This is a lot of stuff that we don't get compensated for, right? We're doing a lot of stuff in district. We're doing a lot of stuff during session, but also out of session. You and I are on the DOT.
Yes.
Ad hoc
That's
committee.
That's going to be fun.
It's going to be 5 or 6 meetings. We're going to have to travel around the state, which, again, I'm not complaining. All I'm saying is it's work, and we should be compensated for the work. Anyone, I said this before when we were talking about the pay raise. There's no business model out there, public or private, that has not given compensation increases to employees in 30 years. Right? So that the model...
Not only that, took away benefits.
Right. So, and again,
and no pay raise.
I'm not saying I would vote for a pay raise, but I am saying there are merits to that argument. And to just say, hey, because the Senate put this pay raise on us, we're now going to have to opt out or give it away, basically says we don't earn the increase.
Well, my point of giving it away is because the exact same reason of Wes saying, I don't believe that I should be able to vote for something for myself, which I've said on the floor.
Yep.
That recording's out there, and yet I still get these text messages saying I chose to take 150% pay increase for myself.
So I actually think if you were to poll our districts, you would probably get a majority of folks said, yeah, y'all do deserve a pay raise if this, and this are true. One of them being you have not seen an increase in compensation since like the early 90s, right?
It's just the political spin. This is 150%. Right. That's 150% increase of one of the in-district expense, not the pay.
But we're in the no-spin zone.
Yeah.
I don't remember what Fox commentators said. But, I mean, we're just having a frank conversation. I'm not saying that, folks, our pay shouldn't be looked at. It should be done the right way. That's all I was saying. And also in that right way was the process, getting some feedback from citizens, and then also post-dating the effective date after the next House and Senate election.
Yes.
That's another thing, too, by the way, folks. Senators can push this because they don't go for an election next year. Guess what? They have 3 years for their voters to forget. 3. And again, I'm not saying that's a little bit cowardly, but I am saying they're hiding in the bushes here because they have 3 years for you to forget, right? And I think...
But every House member...
Every 2 years.
Either they don't pass the budget or they voted for a pay increase.
Correct. And so all I'm saying is the effective date should be after the next election. So for House members, it would be in 2027. For senators, it's not until 2029. That's what I hope the Supreme Court spells that out in a decision.
Yeah.
Because for senators to enjoy us having every 2 years so we can take bullets for them, get out of here. Anyway, but look, we love our senators. It's a healthy back and forth, but we all know the political realities. They're up every 4, we're up every 2. So
Either way, don't believe the political BS.
Yeah.
Talk with your rep. If they're trying to say he didn't want to fund bridges and we got the bridge falling down on Cherry Road, it's not his fault.
Yeah.
He just didn't want to vote for what he deemed as the pay increase that was unconstitutional.
Yep.
If you want to say I wanted to raise my money 150% of the year, don't believe all that, because I'm giving my money to track down child sex predators like RJ Diddy.
Yep. So really quickly, there's a couple options. So if the pay raise goes through, there are 2 options that Republican caucus members have decided to take. Either you take the option that I took, which is opt out, which I don't take any of the in-district increase, and that money just stays with the taxpayers. Have you opted out, or you chose to give it to charity?
Because I said on the floor that I was going to give it to.
I think either
give it to the charities that I thought would help out the most within the community. And I'm only doing that for this term because I think it's unconstitutional to vote for the pay raise.
So those are the 2 sort of, I would say, options that folks are taking in the Republican caucus. They're either opting out of it so that those funds stay with the taxpayer, or if they're getting it, they're turning around and giving it back to district charities or state charities here in Rock Hill, York County, or in the state of South Carolina. So those are the 2 sort of silver lining of if the pay raise is deemed constitutional. So that's all we got for this show. A lot of, I felt like we should have had Tommy Pope in here. Doing a little
court
TV, But yeah, man. Again,
cheers.
What'd you think about this Snafu Brewing Sikkim Sour?
I thought it was going to make my face,
peach and
contort a little bit more.
Yeah,
but it wasn't that bad. It wasn't like as sour as I thought. And I'm not a sour person.
Me neither. I have some friends
but it really wasn't as sour as what I would think that it would be.
I have some friends who are sour fans.
I like the fact that it's a South Carolina brewery.
Yeah, I think you'd like this. It's, again, the first sip, man, really got you back here. But after that first one, it's pretty good. So check them out, Snafu Brewing Company. They're out of North Charleston. They do have a location. So you can always check them out at snafubrewingcompany.com.
And it is a certified South Carolina product?
Yeah. It's got the logo on the can. So good sour. Again, I'd probably have maybe 1 or 2. Tasty beverage. But again, look forward to talking with you next week. Stay tuned for updates. We are out of session. We're still going to try to keep a weekly podcast going. If something sort of messes with that schedule, we'll try to always do a Monday release. But if something does mess with the schedule, we'll communicate through our social channels. Thanks to the 2 listeners for tuning in this week.
Yes.
And
follow us on pintsandpolitics.show. Follow us on social media as well.
Yeah.
Because it helps us get the message out whenever we're there. So, thank you
guys.